Welcome back, Matt. It's a pleasure to have you here again. How are you
Hello.
doing?
Very, very good.
How's the
It's
weather where you are?
it's been pretty hot actually, and we're here on the edge of civilization, and I'm deep within the communist state of California. So
I love that.
inside the enemy territory. So here we are,
Actually,
broadcasting radio free.
I was yesterday because the weather here has been really good down in Devon. So I'm like
Uh,
bottom southwest of England, and I spent all day yesterday thinking, do you know what? I'm going to cut the grass. No, I won't. I'll do it tomorrow. And it's just started raining.
oh, really?
Yeah, they've been busy in their
That's
planes the last couple of days. They've been really busy up there.
oh, with the chemtrails, you mean?
Yeah, bastards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they chemtrailed us a little bit. Whenever I see that, I think, well, we're not to the end yet, I guess. And
Yeah.
there's so many people now that are like, oh, but they're doing good chemtrails. And I was
What?
like, you've never heard that? They're like, oh,
Oh,
they're
yeah. Yeah. I just can't believe people are saying it.
I
Well, there's
know. Well,
nothing good
actually,
about it.
there was there was a video where someone had recorded that the rainwater was green. No, blue. And it was blue. And they go, well, look, it's methylene blue. They're spraying us with methylene blue. I have no way of confirming or denying any of that, but the water was blue. And if you've ever had methylene blue, or if you know what that is, it's
Yeah.
like supposedly good for you, although it's to clear a fish tank.
Yeah.
But supposedly it's anti-carcinogenic. I have no idea if that's
Yeah.
what
I've
they're
heard
spraying us.
that. Yeah.
But even if they were spraying us with pixie dust and diamonds, I mean, nobody's asked us if they wanted to do it. They're just doing it. So
Yeah. That's
I don't
right.
like that.
And nobody should be intervening with nature in that way. Nobody. No one has the
Um,
right to do that.
I think the biggest eye opener was the fact that they were like, I don't know if we've ever seen any natural weather in our lifetime. And I thought, well, I certainly changed since I was younger, but that's something to think about that they've been doing this the whole time. So
I had an old cigarette card, Wills or Willis cigarettes, very, very old. And that had the Tesla weather modification um, sort of diagram on it. And that's old. Yeah, they've been modifying it for, I think, probably for a very long time. I would say at least since the sort of early 1800s. I think they've been doing it.
uh, yeah, that kind of gets us into what we were going to talk about today, if I may,
Mm,
steampunk,
yes, steampunk.
which is so the thing I would say about steampunk is when you look at steampunk, sort of a lot of it looks like Antiquitech.
Mm,
It's like made out of brass and I suppose gold, and there's like glass orbs and sort of
yeah,
it's all quite fascinating. All and it's quite recognizable. The only movie that I can really think of, this is so dumb, but what is it? The Will Smith movie, Wild West. It's a
yeah,
terrible movie, but and I probably should have gone and watched it. I just can't get myself to watch any of these movies anymore.
yeah.
But there's some weird stuff in it where like he's in a dirigible, right? At one point where they're flying. Oh, there's another one called oh okay, this is a classic one. It's kind of recent. I can't remember the name of it now, but the one where it's basically cities on top of these moving like tanks. Remember that?
Yes, yes,
What's the name of that
yeah,
one?
yeah. And the protagonist is, I think, is it a young girl, and she
Yeah,
and she
that's
teams up
right.
with this lad, and I think it's is it maybe even a dad who is
Yeah,
controlling everything. Yeah,
right. And it's basically Tartaria on top of like a
yeah.
giant tank, like
Oh,
a
what's
huge
that
city.
called?
Oh, somebody will remember
It's
it.
quite recent.
Yeah, yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm so sorry to do this again to you. Anyway, but so they show us in movies, and so the one thing I'll say about steampunk is that I, okay, getting back to Shaver briefly, he always talked about like in Atlantis, they made everything out of impermeable metal.
Hmm.
and everything was multifunctional, and none of it really looked like a machine that much. Sometimes it might look like a statue, but it would do different things, like.
Yeah.
And so the metal, the whole idea of the impermeable metal, just reminded me of you of steampunk, and I think that a lot of the steampunk stuff was an attempt, perhaps after, to recreate the Atlantean tech, and maybe it was in part of the millennial reign sort of thing. Who made all that stuff? The most interesting Antiquitech or steampunk sort of device I've ever seen was on some of the old photos, and I'm sure you've seen them, but they look like antenna, and with like a bit of steam coming out of it, and in the steam is like a hologram. And it looked,
Yes.
you ever seen that? And
Yeah.
so, and there was no explanation, but there's like 20, 40 photos of that, all different ones.
Spirit photography.
Spirit photography. And that's what I was wondering. Are they communicating with each other across distances, and they're having the hologram technology? Because that's exactly what Shaver talked about. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, that's what Richard Shaver wrote about.
Well, that's in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as well. I'm sure there's a
There you go.
reference to that.
And that's Antiquitech in there. That there's some
Yeah.
steampunk in that. I mean, the car was steampunk in a way.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it was written by Ian Fleming.
Well, Ian Fleming, yeah. Well, obviously Ian Fleming, James Bond, and but his brother Peter Fleming wrote Travels
Right.
in Tartary.
Now, Ian Fleming was part of a program called Operation James Bond, where supposedly he was. I don't know if it was him directly, but in the operation, it was to contact Hitler. So it was like during the war, they had contact between Hitler and England, and it was through this operation of James Bond that they supposedly did it, and that's where he got the idea for James Bond.
Yeah, they were
Ian Fleming
MI6,
was
I think, or
right. Yeah,
they were both
exactly.
in with the military intelligence.
But I
But
think
I've
his
got
brother was more important than Ian was.
this is the book actually.
Ah,
This is the book here. I referenced it in my first book. There.
that's crazy. That is so
See there,
wild.
a couple of references in there to Tartaria. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and the reason that I think that the spirit, what do we call them?
Spirit photography.
Yeah, the spirit photography. Oh, and I couldn't decide whether they were just communicating with each other, or whether they're communicating to the beyond, or into a different dimension. And certainly, all of it could be possible at the same time. They just
Yeah.
dial in a different frequency. But the reason that I thought that was more recent, the Antiquitech, because the size of it, like the Atlantean things were always huge because they were made for giants. Um, the chairs and the machines and the devices were all quite big. Like we talked about last time, the giant crown, we've seen
Yeah.
that before. So, uh, but this stuff was sort of like made for our normal human 6 foot people size.
Yeah.
So it made me just think that possibly that came at a more recent date, which would lead me to believe possibly it could be millennial reign or just after. What are your thoughts on the millennial reign, just briefly?
I think it's the same
What do you,
period of time we're talking about. I had this conversation with a friend of mine. He's quite popular on Facebook. He's in the group as well, called Leviticus.
yeah.
Levi.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he's not going to call it Tartaria anymore because that was
Right.
an expanse of land, and that actually he prefers to refer to it as the old world. But
Yeah.
for me, the period of time that the Tartarian buildings, these structures were built and they were working with Atlantean technology, is the millennial reign of Christ. We're talking about the same thing. So really, I think the
Yeah.
period of time is the millennial reign. The buildings are Tartarian technology, which is re-engineered Atlantean technology.
Oh, absolutely. and I talked about it. We touched on this briefly last time about the architecture. So I was an architectural major. I ended up being a carpenter. Uh, so I'm a journeyman carpenter, and then that kind of fell out because they kind of overbuilt everything here in California. So I kind of saw the end of building in a way. It was going into like metal stud
Yeah.
construction. And so I was just like, I didn't want to do that. I like working with wood. So I ended up becoming an electrician. So I've been in this field of building like my whole life. And when you ask me about like, how did I get into Tartaria or the old world, or, because Tartaria, like you said, is just a blanket statement.
Yeah,
But,
I think it's
but
one
how
we
did I
need to
get,
use because that's the word that's going to become mainstream sooner or later. People are going to talk about Tartaria, and I think
right.
we need to stick with the name.
Sure. It's a good, it's a good, overall kind of,
Yeah, it encompasses quite a lot.
that's right. But the way I got into it, the biggest way was I started looking at these buildings, and then I started realizing like where the construction force that would have had to have been around to build even one of those buildings would have been so great. Like you would have had to have the material yard, and those blocks. A lot of the times, like Baalbek, for instance. I mean, obviously nobody
Yeah,
our size built that, but they were they were getting that rock from like miles away. Same with
yeah,
the pyramids and all of that. And then you start getting into like Tartaria, like the columns, like the bank, the buildings, the bank buildings, the government buildings that they
they're
call them
always
government.
banks, aren't they? They're government buildings, they're
Yes,
banks, they're post offices, or they're insurance companies because that's who that's the business that their friends are involved in. They give them to their friends.
it's a power. It's the power buildings. So they immediately the government grabs them up.
Mm,
uh, I not to disparage you, but Freemasonry is a classic example. Freemasonry. I mean, it can't be a coincidence that they're called Freemasons, right? And I have a page out of the book where they actually say their number one job is to hide Tartaria, which I
yes.
don't.
Yes, I've seen that document that went
That,
around a
that
while
is
back.
that changed a lot for me. But the whole fact that there's no pictures of it being built per se. Like there's no workforce that could have done that. They're doing it in carts. Where's the tools? There's no power tools. The amount of time that it would take. I mean, I'm doing a 1,000-foot deck for my friend right now just by myself, and it's taken almost a month. And that's
Mm,
just me. But there's just there's no blueprints for these
no,
buildings. And then when you start, all the buildings say they're established or founded.
yeah,
They're not built. And the backstory is always bizarre too. The backstory is like, oh, they built it in like 3 years, and then they tore it down 20 years later, or
yeah.
less than 20 years later, and it's always because of fire, right? It's always a
It's always
fire.
a fire.
Yeah, but somehow fire destroys stone. That's the
Yeah,
entire reason you would use stone, is because it would last forever, but somehow magically a fire has done it. So I mean, they're going out of their way to destroy. And why? I think 100% is because of the millennial reign, because a lot of these buildings represented Christ's reign.
yeah. And what
You,
they don't want us doing is believing that this person, this being with a connection to the creator or a prophet, could live for that long. That's
yeah,
the first thing. But the other thing with the buildings that's worth pointing out is that sometimes if you look into the narratives behind some of these buildings, they'll say, well, the workforce came from all over. They actually brought people in, and so. But my argument with that is, well, first of all, where did they stay? But more importantly, there were buildings like these Tartarian structures going up everywhere at the same time. So how
that's
could
right.
all of these people be shipped to
Right.
certain locations and sites to work when they were having something similar built the same year in the town where they were from? It's
No,
everywhere in the world.
it's absolutely impossible. Um, because not only that, the workforce would have stayed. They wouldn't have just let. It's not like some coercive workforce all over the world that are just, and the more diverse your workforce is, the worse it would be, because
Yeah,
it would just be complete chaos.
yeah,
I could see a really tight-knit group of people doing one building or two buildings at a time in certain areas and then moving on. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing, let's call them the bank buildings with the columns and everything. We see those everywhere, and the same people always take over it. Like you said, it's always ends up becoming either a government building or a bank building or an insurance building or a jail, or an insane asylum, and all these groups of people all work together, and the bank building is quite fascinating because it's all levels of control. And the biggest level of control that we have today on Earth is our currency, the central banks, and the people that run that. And so I stumbled across this the other day on the Millennial Reign. I think this is a passage out of the Bible. It's called "Straight is the gate and narrow is the path," right? That follows Jesus, sort of thing, And they pointed out that the word "straight" wasn't written as STRAIGHT. It was written as STRAIT.
As in water, passageway.
As in the water. Now, if you go to the line of demarcation, but in the Pacific, I forget the name of what it's called, the international date line.
Yeah.
So when you cross over, if you're going to Singapore or Australia, you got to cross over the international date line, and then subsequently you have to do it coming back, right? So you lose a day. Right. But it's a 24-hour day that we have. But if you do all the time zones and you go all the way around the globe and you come all the way back to that, it's 21 hours. So
but that's the thing
missing there.
That's the thing with the globe, though, isn't it? I mean, if you follow the narrative and we're on a spinning ball that's going around at average at 1,000 miles an hour, then your day, if you're at the top, you're going to be rotating a lot faster than you are if you're in the center.
Well, what they pointed out was that there's 3 hours of missing time up there on the international date line, which would be 3 time zones, which would be roughly almost the width of America per se. So it's could be quite large. In other words, so if you're flying 3 hours over something, it could be like a couple thousand miles. Right. And then it's a girl called let me just give a shout out to her because I don't know her or anything, but I just stumbled across all her stuff. She's absolutely amazing. Her channel is called Leaving Babylon.
Right.
And she knows Jason Jack, and those are my two go-to channels for the Millennial Reign. But so straight is the gate and narrow is the path, and you start looking at the international date line, and you go back in time and start looking at all the maps, and all of a sudden land starts appearing up there.
Yeah.
Right. And if you go back far enough, there's California as an island, which
the Isle of Cali,
is absolutely true, because I've lived up at Mammoth and I've had to drive up with the 395 is the highway that goes up there, and all along the highway is what they call the Long Valley Caldera, and you can see signs of volcanic activity, and the caldera is the edge of a volcano, and it's called the Long Valley Caldera because instead of it being a round volcano like we normally think of, this thing is possibly one of the largest volcanoes in the world, and it goes for about 200-300 miles, right? About 200 miles, and all along that crack on the inland part of California is salt seas, like flats, not seas, but like what used to be seas, and they still harvest salt to this day. And I'm like, well, there it is. There is where the island was. The water came in here, and it probably came up around San Francisco. But so you start going back into these old maps, and so California's an island, or the water came around. But there's a huge plot of land up in this area of where now the international time zone is, right? So the farther back you go, the bigger this land is. And then the more recent, all of a sudden it just disappears, and it just turns into Alaska, with a bunch of little islands, right?
Yeah.
And that's called the Bering Strait.
Yeah.
However, in the old days, on the old maps, there were two straits up there, and I can't think of the name. One was the Bering Strait, more on the Asian side, and the other one side was called something else. And I should know it, but they but that ends up becoming quite mythical. That the other passage, and there's a lot of references to that name that I can't remember. This is a terrible podcast now. But okay, just to end on that, and I almost fell out of my chair. This happened like the other day. So and of course, you know this more than anyone. All these old maps, they're every town is named. Thousands of names. Like, how did they come up with all these names? How did they get so well mapped out? These cartographers aren't just out there willy nilly drawing things. They're hired by royalty, and probably under penalty of death did they have to map all these things out. It was an important job, surely. But okay, here's what the craziest thing was. This body of land that was laying in between what we would call now Alaska per se, and I suppose Russia, over on that side, was called Terra de Jesus. And so I looked it up, and in Latin it means land of Jesus. I mean, I almost feel. Have you ever heard this before? I've never even heard this.
I haven't. No,
I couldn't believe it. So I posted some of that stuff on my Facebook, so you can go and check it out. But and it just continued, and then at some point, as it starts becoming more recent, and the maps start changing. And I'm not saying the maps are changing because they're hiding it, although that is what's going on eventually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there's also the fact that more than likely a cataclysm event happened.
Yeah,
and probably around 1700s area, right before 1776, or possibly even after, or continuation all the way through that time till like the 1820-ish time, because we know something happened then as well.
Yes.
And who made it happen? Well, we don't know. That's it's been conjectured that the bad guys made it happen, but then it's also now being conjectured that it was actually Jesus that made it happen. And what he did was what they did, because it was this reign of the saints, wasn't it? So he wasn't just him by himself.
No.
And so all his followers and the saints, and these saints more than likely were also giants, or what we would call giants, in the maybe 14 to 20 foot tall range. And so they, what's the word I'm looking for? They defended themselves and went up into the North Pole area, or what we call the North Pole now. And the old maps, when we look at that, it's a big circle, right? Well, the land looks like a big circle.
Have you seen where, when you look at these early maps, I think a lot of them were Dutch, weren't they? A lot of the cartographers were Dutch originally. But
okay,
if you look where Siberia is, and you look at an early map, that's Archangel.
Is that what it says?
Yeah, Archangel.
So well, there's another thing I could add to that. Is also it says Gog and Magog there.
Yes.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
And then if you go and look on Google Earth at Gog and Magog, Siberia, which is like supposedly the most desolate bit of land in the world, right? That's why they stuck everybody out there.
Yeah.
Because they can't go anywhere. And they were supposed to develop it, but how are you going to develop that land? It's just undevelopable, because you can't even get to it. But if you look at the map, not the map, if you look at the actual like Google Earth per se, there's holes everywhere. Like something really gnarly happened up there. Like
craters, war. Don't they? Yeah.
Yeah. And so land of Jesus. So what's her name again? Gosh darn it. Her name's Madeline, and she's Leaving Babylon is the name of the channel. Her name's Madeline, but Leaving Babylon.
Yeah.
So she says that the saints and Jesus, they moved back into the land of the North Pole area. And so the old maps show that as a circle. And as the maps progress, the land of Jesus starts shrinking. And it also now is called Campo de Jesus, and which is camp of Jesus, or comp of Jesus.
Hmm.
And doesn't the Bible speak of that, like the camp of the saints?
Yeah.
And in the last day, Gog and Magog will surround the camp of the saints. Well, it's quite fascinating. It's a circle. And what do we see today is Arctic warfare. And, and there's a big battle with the Dutch and Trump trying to get Greenland.
Yes.
You know, I'm sure it's staged, a little bit, like the geopolitics is a bit staged. Like, oh, we're going to buy Greenland and all this thing, but really they're already there. And one of
Yeah.
the northernmost points on Greenland that they'll allow us to see is basically um, American sort of base. It's not an American like military base. They
Yeah.
call it's for weather, but
Yeah. My
whether or not we believe them.
I have he's not my second cousin. I think he's my third cousin. He actually looks very similar to me, but he's got a goatee beard. He works there.
In Greenland.
Yeah, he works on in that base.
Yeah, that's
And I've
interesting.
reached out, but he's never replied to me. Yeah, but
God, I'd love to go there.
yeah, me too.
Okay, so the speculation is this: Madeline from Leaving Babylon, she speculates, and so does Jason Jack, that really Greenland, because again, as we get back to the globe, scenario, one of the first things that I learned in school was like, hey, Greenland might not be this big,
Yeah,
right? Because it gets spread out. So there's some sort of weird mythical strange stories going on with Greenland. But what they speculate is that Greenland really isn't an island. That actually it comes all the way over America or Canada, sort of thing, because we don't really know what's up there, and then comes all the way back
no.
over
And you're
into
not
what
allowed to
used to be
fly
the
over
land
there
of
either,
Jesus.
are you? Nothing
What's that
flies
again?
over there. Nothing flies over there. And this is the thing,
Yeah.
everybody keeps going on about for years now, but more recently, the last few years, it's really started to hot up. Antarctica. What's in Antarctica? Stop looking at Antarctica. That's misdirection. The North Pole,
Yeah,
or whatever you want to call that area,
right.
that is where people need to be looking.
And
That's I believe Agartha.
they all wanted to go around early 1800s. That's when all the expeditions, they all wanted to go up there. And then all of a sudden it became, oh, it's just floating ice. So
Mm,
the North Pole is not, it's not like one spot. It sort of moves around a little bit. And actually it is moving slightly, like the magnetic North Pole.
yeah,
But I mean, that's really interesting because they talk about Mount Meru being up there and that being a magnetic mountain, and that's the
yeah,
real reason that everything's pointing that direction. But also, if Jesus was reigning from up there, he wants us to come find him. That's why he made it's not an easy passage to go, right? But because narrow is the path to get there, but he would want us to find him. So all compasses point to him. I mean,
yeah,
that's a bit strange.
yeah.
But I'll tell you something about Tesla and the North Pole. There's a story, you might have heard this before, but so there was a story that there was an expedition going to the North Pole, and I forget who was in it, but it was somebody that Tesla didn't like. Now, whether or not Tesla's even a real person or not, we don't know. But he had a doomsday device, which was basically like a gigantic electromagnetic device that could send energy to any point in the world in our known land. And because of that, like you could just apparently you could just type in the longitude and the latitude, and you could like kind of triangulate it and dial it in. And because of that, and that was like free energy through the air, sort of their way of talking about that, because Tesla always said that, and I always thought that was interesting. But now that I get older and I'm an electrician now, I'm like, okay, that's possible. But because of that, you could basically make a short circuit, and in other words, like just dump a massive amount of energy, which is what a short circuit is. It's like an
Yeah.
open passage to the ground, and so it just dumps all your energy instead of like a controlled burst. It's going to dump all that energy, into one spot, and basically like a doomsday device.
Yeah.
And they speculate that he was trying to wipe out this expedition to the North Pole. I think it had something to do with Edison, or Edison was
Well,
involved.
Edison will always be his biggest rival. I mean, he worked for him initially, didn't
That's
he? And
what
he
they
got
say.
absolutely shafted by him.
Yeah.
But then, of course, Marconi beat him to the finish line with radio transmission across the
Right.
Atlantic, and so he's probably, if he was the person we've been led to believe, then I would say Edison would be top of his hit list.
And so what happened was he tried to get him and he missed, and it became the Tunguska event because you
Yeah.
and if you look in that story, they're like, if you look at where the expedition was and where Tunguska is, the numbers are very similar, except they were swapped, sort
Yeah.
of thing. So we missed. There is no official story on what happened at the Tunguska event, but I mean, if you
Tesla got blamed for it, though, didn't he? I mean, that's
yeah,
that's the narrative. He took the
well,
blame
I
for that.
think
Well, people accused him of it, didn't they?
I think that maybe it was a test run, because
Mm.
Tesla is probably just if he was real. I mean, it just sounds so similar to these backstory that they always kind of make up, like where like we talked about this last time, like with Bill Gates. It's like, oh, we worked in our garage and then we came up with this
Yeah.
design,
Yeah.
but really it's the government. They've been working on it for years. They've had it for years, and they go, here's the internet. You put this out there for you, and you're our guy. We're going to use you. Tesla, you're our guy. Edison, you're our guy. We're going to use you to do, AC, electrical, and we're going to encompass the known civilized world with wires. And so we're never going to have free energy. And then these wires
Oh,
are going to, control you because the
yeah.
electromagnetic grid now. And we can also see into your house using these wires. There's all kinds of, the CIA they can go around to people's houses and look in your Wi-Fi because they can just use Wi-Fi now. But in the old days, they could use electrical and triangulate you, and they had the equipment, and they could just see where you were in your house, what you were doing. Oh,
Yeah.
he's going to the bathroom. Fantastic.
Mm.
So
Yeah. And look at the cable that they laid across the Atlantic as well. From England to America. Apparently there is a cable there, isn't there, that was laid
they're
for
everywhere.
communication. But I think that's probably bullshit myself.
Well, that's an interesting one. As an electrician, I think about laying thousands and thousands of miles of cable
Mm.
underneath the ocean.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't seem like it would last.
No, and the
You know?
signal, I mean, look, here with I was told when we when we moved into this house, I know it's different, but it's similar. They said to us, don't bother going with broadband through through the BT line, because we're so far from the exchange that the
Mm.
signal by the time it gets here, because we're in the middle of nowhere, is too weak to have a decent signal. So what you need to do is get a wireless router and go with a particular service provider because they've got a mast nearby. So we did that because the longer, the further away you are from the source, the weaker the signal's getting. So running a cable across the Atlantic or under the Atlantic, I mean, how possible is it that the signal is, that the strength, the power of the energy in that cable is going to, that's too far an expanse to run a bloody cable along and expect
Well,
to
I
have
think it's
clarity.
possible if they're doing fiber optics, you can do
But
that
this is
because
old, isn't it? The cables,
yeah.
you
Well,
know,
the first thing is first thing is satellites seem to be a complete myth.
yes, I
You know,
think so.
and we've got satellites that are landing in people's backyards attached to balloons. Now, what's that
Hmm.
all about, right?
Mm.
And we've seen photos and videos of them launching the satellite with the balloon. Now, why would you even need to do something like that?
Yeah.
The other bizarre thing is we live out here where you can go out into the desert, roughly an hour or two away, and then go out in the desert and you could just see into the night sky for forever. And you will see, we've seen Starlink go by, or what they call Starlink. What is it? Is it a bunch of
Mm.
balloons up there? I can't see that far, so I don't, but you can clearly see it. The other thing is you get anywhere near salt water, because we live by the ocean. I mean, if I was living half a mile far closer to the ocean, everything at my house would be destroyed. I'm not sure how you could possibly imagine laying thousands and thousands of miles of cable of anything into the ocean and expecting it to last longer than a year.
Yeah,
I mean, surely it would. How can you make something that's going to something that important?
yeah,
Otherwise, you're going to be doing it like every couple of years, wouldn't you? I mean, just fall apart, wouldn't it? Salt
yeah,
water is extremely corrosive. I don't care
yeah,
what's there.
absolutely.
And the bottom of the ocean, we don't even know how. I'm talking very loud now.
No, but you're
Just,
right. I mean, if we don't know how deep the bottom of the Atlantic is, how did they know how long the cable needed to be?
I
When they're
across
making
the
this, it could go
Atlantic.
miles down.
What if it just now you're bringing that up? That's blowing my mind. I'll tell you one thing though. My dad was actually the senior engineer on the very first, on a bunch of them, but on the very first uh, oil derrick, no oil platform out in
Hmm.
the North Sea. That was a quite a few years it took them to sort of get that, and I think they couldn't touch down to the bottom of the ocean, obviously, because it was, and that's actually the shallowest region is in the north part of the sea there.
Yeah.
But he said they couldn't do it, and then the ocean was just way too violent. I don't even know why they're trying to do that anyway. It was quite an operation, but anyway. So he was involved with that, and it just the Atlantic Ocean is just a really dangerous place, even
Yeah.
more dangerous than the Pacific. And there's something to do with the name Pacific. It has something to do with the Millennial Range, something about pacifying. Anyway, but I mean, it's fascinating that the Atlantic is named after Atlant or Atlantis. I mean, that's pretty good.
Exactly. And that's where
Um,
people need to be looking, isn't it? So I think, well, if you look at flight paths, and I know people will say, well, it's in case of emergencies that they don't fly directly in a straight line from, say, London to New York or London
mm,
to Miami. And I've done that a couple of times, that flight. You go north and then you go back down again. But
right.
I think the reason that shipping lanes and flight paths are laid out how they are is so we don't see certain things.
Oh, you're not even allowed to. You're not allowed to go to the 60th parallel
Mm.
on either end. They'll literally kill you, and that's been proven more and more. Like there was an expedition, a private expedition that tried to go to Antarctica, and they came close to the 60th. They immediately came and got them.
Yeah.
They transported them all, to another island or whatever, and then magically a few of them died somehow. They got
Yeah.
sick and died, and so and then as far as going north, you can't even talk about going north. Like if you're in Alaska and you mention that you even might think about traveling north, people will come and knock on your door. uh,
Really.
a few people have tried just to like kind of set out, and you're just not allowed to. And
See, the thing is with
it's
that,
a very mysterious place.
who has given a group of people, an organization, a body of people, who gave them the right to tell us where we can and can't go? Because I don't remember agreeing to that.
It
And
it, it just happened, didn't it?
it's just that this whole thing's needs addressing. That the fact that there are a group of people sat somewhere that decide where 99% of us are allowed to go. Bullshit. We can go wherever we want. It doesn't belong to them. And like you were talking about Greenland earlier on, and Trump, and look at Antarctica. All of the islands around Antarctica. There's the Rothschilds Island. All of
Mm-hmm.
these elite families own a little chunk, a little island around Antarctica. Who did they buy it from? Because I don't remember the rest of the world saying it's okay if they take something that doesn't belong to them. What the fuck happened?
Well, I think this is going to open up a can of worms, but the way I've studied things, I made an agreement with myself a long time ago. I go, here's the way to do things. You just keep taking something and you hold it up to the light and you keep layering all these stories and and where the light shines through, well, that's where your truth is. Start there. That's where the rabbit holes begin. And so, in other words, when things keep lining up, or different stories over many years, different people don't even know each other, but somehow these similarities keep shining through. Well, there's something there. So they've told us that we live on a globe. That way we can't go anywhere now. Now we're on
Yeah.
a globe. It's space, and we're all so alone, and there's no life. It's so crazy if you think about it, being on the other side of it. But so okay, so if that's true, fine. And Richard Shaver talks about leaving the planet and different things like that. But I have I have an explanation even for that. But anyway, so okay, so if we do live on a globe, there's our model. We have it, right? So let's just
Yeah.
make another model because we've got all this flat Earth that's making a comeback. And I when I first heard that, I was like, come on, guys, this is crazy. But no flat earther ever became a flat earther because he thought the earth was flat. It's only because they've gone to try to debunk it. Same as me.
Yes.
I was like, let
Yes.
me go over here and just shoot this out of the water. Well, years later, now I'm like, okay, now I have to make another model of the flat earth.
Yeah.
And so that way when we ever do learn the truth, then at least we can hit the ground running, right? We have our models that we've sort of created and so the flat Earth, I thought, well, we can't just be flying in space on a flat Earth. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, maybe, but that doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So anyway, what I've come up with, it's not my idea, but what I've ended up, my research points to, I think we're in a crater on a larger planet. Maybe it's spherical, but it's so huge, and I'm talking thousands of times larger than what
Yeah.
we think.
Yeah. I think so
Could
too.
that explain why everything looks so flat? Because we're just down in this gigantic crater and it is flat where we are. And then when you Augusta Picard and all these people that have gone up and taken photos, and they're like, it's really, really flat.
Yeah.
Could that explain why it's just a much larger? Maybe it's flat forever. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But if we're on a much larger planetoid, yeah, I don't know how that works, but it's so much larger that really it does seem flat. But I really do believe that we're in a crater, and there does seem to be an ice wall or an edge. What's on the
Yeah.
outside of it?
And is
Probably
this the
more water.
firmament? Is this like,
It
like they
could be a
showed us on The
dome.
Simpsons? Aren't
It
we?
very well could be.
We're like in a. It's like someone's literally put a glass dome over us, and we cannot get out. I mean, people have
That's
said that
right.
they've watched Musk firing, his rockets up, and they're just hitting the firmament. I mean,
That's
but
right.
the technical, obviously, term for the firmament would be the Van Allen belt.
The
We're talking
Van
about the
Allen belt,
same kind
right?
of thing, aren't we? But I think so too. And I don't know if you've seen it, but there are a couple of books written. I think I've got, yeah. Normally, what, because I've got so many old books that I use for research, I keep the ones near me that I'm using, and then the rest are on a larger bookshelf. But I don't know if have you seen
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah. Nas Confunden, yes.
Yeah, and then the one by that's sort of the
Well, check it
sequel
out.
to it.
They're all craters.
Yeah,
Crater Earth. Now, the
yeah.
strangest thing about Crater Earth is that Disneyland supposedly all the
Here it goes.
Disneyland.
Sorry, Matt.
Oh no, go ahead. Oh yeah,
So they're
all
all the different
craters and
nodes.
domes maybe,
Yeah,
and
so
maybe domes.
we're stuck in the middle, and Nibiru's here, and
I
they've
think
got
there
what
was one. I think there was one called Heaven, wasn't there?
I'll I can't see that. There may well be, but this is land of the custodians, the Anunnaki land, Venus, Draco, Mars, Neptune, and Uranus, Jupiter. They're all there. The reptilians, land of the clones.
I
Um,
always laugh at
and
Uranus.
the
Sorry.
giants of Great Tartary who wanted to liberate humanity is a chapter in this book. This is the second book.
Imagine living in Uranus. How unfortunate would that be?
I know a lot of people that do seem to spend a lot of time there and have actually perfected the skill of talking out of it.
Oh man, I might be
Mm.
one of them. Well, I think the
No.
Nazis. I think the Nazis have escaped the dome, and I think the way to do that is to go under the ice.
Yeah, I think it's under. It's not over.
And so there was a couple letters that were sent back and forth between old Germany, and one of the sailors that was on the submarines that were going that that were trying to go under and through the ice, and they were talking about it, and it said that we had found land, that they'd found, I forget the name of the land. It's oh gosh, it's quite famous, the name. But so, and then at one point he says, "Look, I'm going to have to stop communicating with you because we're actually going to go out there and stay there now, and 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 they're going to build out there now." A guy, God give Lemeste, who's very famous channel for Crater Earth, doesn't talk about anything but Crater Earth, and he just points out all the different things that seem to point to Crater Earth, and it's a master course. It's hours and hours and hours long. I highly suggest people go look at it, but I mean, you got to really be committed to do it.
Yeah.
And it's I got to one point, and I was like 4 or 5 videos in, and I go, this is irrefutable. Some of the stuff he's showing here, this is outrageous. One of the things was that all Disneylands are shaped like Crater Earth, and that Tom Sawyer's Island is actually the land of Tom Sawyer's Island is actually the shape of the Earth inside of Crater Earth, like what we know as our known lands.
Right.
And that if you take the star map and the moon map, what is the moon a reflection of the larger Earth?
Well, yeah, I say always. I've been thinking that for some time now. Yeah.
You know, it's the maddest thing to even think that. But if you go back, and once again, here we go to the late 1800s, there's books that say, is the moon a reflection of the Earth? And then there's people that have, anyway, so if you take the moon map and because they mapped it on Google, I mean, like Google moon, and then the star map, Google star, everything's Google. If you take the star map and the moon map and you overlay it and then you adjust for size, they actually fit. And so God gave them a stay. I hate saying this because it's hard to say. That's his title of his channel, but I don't know his name. He points this out, and so he did it, and he goes, "Now look, how's this work now? He basically Sirius A, the star Sirius A, ends up being on this crater on the moon called oh gosh, it was all on my Facebook. But the name of this crater, Sepulchus Gallus M." And so they're the same, in other words. So he's pointing out that, hey, the Sirius A star and Pulsus Gallus M crater are the same, or they're in the same location. He goes, now, if that's the truth, he goes, some of the other things just sort of line up. So he started going, look, he goes, look, the asteroid belt is here on the star map. But if you look on the moon map, it's a gigantic like ridge. And it lines up. Mars lines, all the planet, they all start lining up. And I was like, wait, this is kind of shocking. He goes, now, Sirius A has another star next to it, Sirius B.
Yeah, Sirius B, yeah.
And Sepulchus Gallus M has another crater right next to it. Now, if you go to Disneyland, every Disneyland, like there's one in Japan, there's one in France, there's one in Florida, one here in Anaheim. They all have a round building next to it, next to Disneyland, in the same location that Sirius B would be.
Oh wow,
I mean, that is very bizarre.
Isn't it funny, like all these places? Because I've been to Anaheim, and I've been to Orlando, and I've been to Paris, and I was talking to someone earlier on, and if you could go to these places again, knowing what you know now, you wouldn't be going on the rides. You'd be trying to work out what's going on. Having said that, I'd be intrigued to find out if I could get inside one of these underground tunnels, or what Club 33 is all about at Disney.
You would end up disappearing. They'd disappear you. Plus, the other thing is you can go into the tunnels and never come out, solely because you just can't find your way out. They all look the same. They all look the same. Supposedly, there was a video game called The Underground or something like that, where he just wandered and wandered around, and they were like, "Oh, it's a video game." I go, "I don't think it's a video game. I think that possibly this could be video, like found video from people wandering around in the underground. They just can't ever find their way out. They have to map it. Like even the people, the Illuminati, let's just call them the Illuminati,
Yeah.
that go into the underground here at the gosh the big museum, the Getty Museum here, right?
Hmm.
The Getty Museum is a fortress, and it goes miles down supposedly, and it connects with the old German uh, military base that used to be here at the top of Topanga Canyon or Laurel Canyon, right?
Laurel
And
Canyon, yeah.
that's how Hollywood started, was right there at Laurel Canyon. And David McGowan talks about this, and that's really fascinating book. Uh, it's called Laurel Canyon. But even the people that go down into that underground, they do it all the time, but they
Mm.
even have to have maps
Mm.
because, and they have to be escorted because you guys, if you weren't, you would just you would take one wrong door and that you would never find your way back out.
Yeah.
They said.
Yeah.
So I mean, and everything is connected down there. Plus, the other thing is like even like you go back to the 1920s and like Los Angeles Times had many articles about the reptilian civilization that lived under Los Angeles, right? You heard that before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, really? Yeah, you that right on the front page. And then there was a war over Los Angeles in the sky, roughly about the
Yeah.
same time that all that
Battle of
sort of
Los
was going on.
Angeles, yeah.
And then now we never hear anything about it. But they do have an underground now here in Los Angeles. And I was like, when did that happen? When did
Mm.
we get an underground? This is probably like 2000, year 2000, and all of a sudden, hey, LA has an underground, a subway, because I just come back from England, and I was like, no, they don't, no. And I went on it, and it was like literally two stops, guy. I went like 2 miles on the subway because that's all they had open. But I was like, wait, when did this start happening? There was no an official announcement or anything like that. They
Yeah.
just, oh, we're just
They're
gonna be
opening
doing,
up, aren't they? Opening up old tunnels. I sometimes wonder,
yeah.
I mean, look at the Boring Company with Musk, but I think they're just opening up old tunnels. But I sometimes wonder, is it possible that these weren't tunnels? All of these tunnels we talk about that connect all of these buildings and they connect cities. What if they were corridors once? And it's just that we have been flooded with mud. Everywhere's been raised. The ground level's been raised because constructing a tunnel underground is a lot harder than building a passageway above ground.
Well, they're all
Um,
brick, the old ones. Like how,
yes,
like that makes it even way more difficult. That's
yeah.
so much more complicated.
So I wonder if they weren't tunnels originally; they were corridors, passageways, and everything's been filled in. So what was once a corridor now becomes a tunnel.
Well,
Logistically,
Shaver says that there was a surface, but and there were buildings on the surface, but most of their time was spent down in these underground cities. There were elevators that connected them. The most fascinating thing that he said was, and he alluded that the tunnels were already there, so they were just immediately boring tunnels. I mean, of course, a lot of these tunnels could be mud flooded, like you said. I don't doubt that. But what he did say was that because they would travel in these tunnels was what he called rollouts. So they had craft that would actually, and they were like anti-gravity craft,
yeah,
and they would go through these. So they would travel and traverse these tunnels very rapidly. But
I think they're
every
still
so
using
often,
those.
yeah, totally. But every so often they would have hubs, just like you might have a train hub. So a large circle with all the tunnels going out from there.
Is it
And
possible that they were star forts? I've often wondered if the star forts are what connected those.
think that's more Millennial Reign. I think the Star Forts are Millennial Reign because, well, let me just finish that with the
Mm,
hubs. So I read that and I go, oh, the hubs. Okay, so that makes sense. Like so you go into like a circle, and then you can choose you can sort of choose where you're going to go next. Like
mm.
and these are spread out all over the world, and there's just hubs. I mean, that makes sense to me as a builder. But it turned out like in Peru, they uncovered one of these hubs, and that just blew my mind. ancient. Nobody knew why or what it was, why it was even there. And I looked at it and I go, that's one of the bloody hubs that they're talking about. That
Mm.
Richard Shaver. It's just one more check mark for Richard Shaver. For all so many things that he talked about, just keep coming true. You know, like he just he couldn't have made it up. No one person was smart enough to just make that up. And he says he didn't make it up. He was showing it all through the thought wire. Remember that transmission that they were using, and and then also was told about it from the people of the underground that lived down there. And then the people of the underground, they want to connect with the people on this. They want to be known. However, they also feel that if they are known, then they will be destroyed, sort of thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them for that. So there's anyway, that's what were we just talking about?
I can't remember, but when we talked about the transmission of being able to send what would be a very early kind of Zoom, wouldn't it? Sending the I suddenly started thinking about the Chronovisor in the Vatican, where they've got that device where you can see almost like video footage of the past and the future, and they believe that one of those is in the Vatican. But yeah, I was.
It's totally possible. I think I forget one of Al Bilbeck's friends, right? I forget, and what he did, he started. It's almost like John Hutchinson, where they were in the military, and they started getting all the old military grade stuff, like as a hobby, all the tubes and the different transmitters and receivers and things like that. And he started dialing, and that's how you can look into the future and the past, because it's all in frequency. And so what's going on is, and it's probably crystals, right, inside the transmitters and stuff, and you can dial in the frequency, and basically through that information, the equipment can make a picture for you. So it's 100% feasible, absolutely feasible. Like if I can.
That's how old radios worked, isn't it? They were crystal
that's
sets,
exactly how
crystal radios, and you dialed
digital.
in.
That's why everything's digital now, because they can control that. They can control digital.
Yeah.
You know, just switches the numbers. There's this other weird thing where if you take a laser and you take two lasers and you make a cross or whatever, it doesn't have to be cross. I just mean two directional lasers. And then you put your eye up to it, not so that the laser's in your eye. People are like actually seeing like digital matrix patterns. Like,
really?
So the fabric of reality could possibly be exactly what they show us in the Matrix movies. It's just numbers, dashes, and dots, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And is that
the Bible states that twice? I think there are two references in the Bible to us living in a matrix.
Well, it must be, because I've never been more fascinated by this whole like I feel so much closer to Jesus, because I feel like it's very real now.
Yeah.
Like there's a guy, and I highly recommend going to these channels, Jason Jack, and what did I call it? What was the other one?
Oh, the Babylon.
Yeah, Leaving Babylon. And Jason Babylon. Jack. So you can go and do your own research and check all that out. But the most fascinating kind of confirmation of that is Olaf Hansen and the Smoky God story. You've heard of this?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
The journey to the North Pole or whatever.
Yeah.
So they go up there into that North Passage, and they meet the giants who have technology, and there's a king. And I wonder, is that like the camp of the saints? Did they actually meet? You know, was that one of the kings, like Jesus? You know, or one of the Jesus's saints, or sort of thing. I don't know. All the cities around everywhere are all named after saints. You got Saint Paul. You've got, I can't think of any more, but everything's named after sort of saints. And then there was a shift, and then now everything's named after pagan gods. Yeah. Right? There's not one rocket called Jesus, right? All the rockets are named after like Apollo, and Apollyon is the destroyer.
Yeah.
and Madeline surmises that, are they setting up all these rockets so they can fire it in to the North Pole? And
Yeah.
that's why they name them all these pagan gods, because it's this age-old biblical war between Gog and Magog, or she calls it Jaj and Majaj, and then Jesus and his saints. Okay, so I think if we follow the architecture, you can kind of make out a little bit of like differential timelines, the differing timeline. You've got gigantic stones like Baalbek,
Yeah.
right? Clearly, as far as I'm concerned, clearly giants were doing that, and it's quite rough. Like, even though it's well done, it's still just building blocks.
Yeah,
right?
they're not polished chunks of granite or marble, are they? They are
sort of, yeah. And it's the same thing with South America. You've got large, and the chunks of stone are starting to get smaller now.
Yeah.
As you start moving into this era. So now the chunks they're still in the tonnage, but they're not as big as Baalbek, right? And I was told that the stones of Baalbek were so large because they were landing their craft on it. So when the craft would come into this dimension and then land, it would be quite heavy. But when they're phased out of our dimension,
yeah, it's due to our gravity.
They don't weigh anything.
Or technically our gravity.
How much time have we got?
Oh, let's have a quick look. Not long, my friend.
Okay, well, let me just continue on with just briefly with the architecture thing. So the block starts changing to the point where the stones are the size of, maybe a few feet, and like the bank buildings, those are all made out of blocks of stone. But there's now they're more manageable. They're still probably half a ton, but they're like 3 or 4 feet big, which is like, nobody builds like that. Like, I'm a builder, right? Nobody goes, hey, you know what this place needs is stone blocks, and not just any stone block. It's got to come from like 100 miles this direction, certain stone, and they have to be at least half a ton, guys, or we can't make this building. Exactly. Who's thinking like that? Nobody thinks like that unless there's a reason, or it's easy for you. If you're a giant, then okay, it becomes a little bit easier. If you have the technology, it's certainly a lot easier. If you got the power tools, or if you're just cutting it with the ray, or if you're lifting it up with anti-gravity and just transporting it, which we know that they do that.
Yeah.
Or just levitation, I guess you could say. It could be acoustic levitation. Okay, so then the stones start getting really, really small, and then to the point where you can see that we're like modern day humans, our size humans, trying to mimic what was there. So you've got like in Peru and stuff, you got a lot. And by the way, Machu Picchu in Peru, if you take Machu Picchu and turn it on its side and look at it, you can see that it's a face of a gigantic titan. They've carved the laying on his back, like so many mountains that we wonder about, right?
Yeah.
Like in Alaska, there's a mountain called the Sleeping Lady. It's literally called, I think they changed the name now, but it's called the Sleeping Lady. And if you look at it, it's a woman sleeping on her back, which is one of the few ones where they're actually on their stomach, with the back to the sky, because a lot of times they're on their back with their face up. And we call a mountain the face of the mountain, right? And we're at the foothills, and gold is found in veins, and we know that the Anunnaki needed gold. They ingested it somehow. So did they die, or some of them pass away, and the gold in their veins settled, and we're harvesting all their stuff?
I'm sorry, Matt. I've got to. I'm so pleased you said that, because there is a blood group. A lot of people talk about Rh negative, and I know that it's it's not rare, but it is rare in comparison to O, B negative, and so on. Rh negative. A lot of people believe that that's Atlantean blood, and my mother-in-law.
I agree.
Yeah, I think so too. But there's another one, a lot rarer, called Rh null. Now, Rh null, Rh null is known as golden blood. There are
I gotta look that up now.
Yeah,
deep. How did you stumble across that?
I was talking to someone I was on a podcast for an American channel. She's called Heidi Love, and she is she's a nurse, but she specializes in bloods. and she's been doing it a very long time, and she's been looking into it, and I wrote about it in my new book. I did some research with her on it, and there are 43 people in the world allegedly that have, yeah, Rh null. The male and female, both parents have to have Rh null for the child to have it. That golden blood, I believe, is what you're talking about there. I believe that's the blood that they're looking for. That's why ancestry.com popped up, and that's why we have the PKU, the heel prick test. They are looking for that. They're looking for the bloodline of Christ.
Well, one of the biggest things that comes out of the Bible is blood is sacred. You are not allowed to mess with the blood. And in the Bible, I don't even know if I can
they've
get
been
into
doing
it.
that since 2020, haven't they? Altering our
I'll touch on this just briefly because I'll start offending people if I get too deep into this subject. But the bloodlines are super important. Obviously, the Illuminati bloodlines are really important to them to the point where they have incestuous relationships just to keep the blood inside the family. Of course, their blood, and then they start deteriorating.
Yeah,
right?
Hasberg and Cleopatra, Tutankhamun. Yeah, they've showed us what can happen.
Right. So clearly, it's very important. The flip side to that is you've got the Kalergi plan. I forget his first name, but they were like, we're going to mix all the races, and that's how we're going to wipe out, this one particular race. We're going to mix them all together, and then they'll be easily controlled. No, but it's always about the blood. Always about the blood. In the Bible, God says, don't, you can eat the animal, but you're not allowed to eat the blood or drink the blood.
Yeah.
And then you start getting into the whole, I don't know if I can say it, adrenochrome. Am I allowed to say that?
No, I don't think so. But you have now, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. But YouTube YouTube just literally this week said that I appealed. Every 6 months I have to appeal about being demonetized, and they've demonetized me again. So it doesn't matter now.
They'll still run commercials on our videos. They do whatever they want.
Yeah, and this is the argument I've had with them. They said that the information I'm putting out there is sensitive, and I said, well, why are you hosting it then? If you're going to keep demonetizing me, why don't, because of my content, why are you allowing it on your platform? That's hypocrisy.
Go and look at Google, and Google is Chrome.
Yeah.
And then the other word they have, the other word that starts with ADR. So they have both. Google uses both.
Yeah, that's what it's for. And Google Mail, Gmail, the symbol, I don't know if it still is now, but that was a Freemason's apron.
Yeah.
It's in plain sight.
So that channel, God Give Le Mystère, that talks about Creator Earth. Remember I said that he was on YouTube, and all he taught. Now he's on Rumble. So you can go check him, find him on Rumble. God Give Le Mystère. I can spell it for you. But he was on YouTube, and all he ever talked about was Creator Earth. He didn't talk about anything controversial. He didn't even mention the word that I wasn't even supposed to mention. Nothing like that. But it was fascinating body of work. I mean, like I said, it was a master's in information. They took him off. YouTube kicked him off. And I was like, boy, that really legitimizes everything you're saying, even to a higher degree. You got kicked off of YouTube for talking about the shape of the earth.
Yeah. I think what I've been, I've to be demonetized and then have to wait, well, it was 3 months to appeal and then apply again, and they still won't. And if you go through the interviews and all the podcasts, they're about Tartaria, bloodlines, orphans and orphan trains, star forts and world's fairs. I'm not talking about anything. I'm not talking about anything that would cause harm or could be considered dangerous or harmful in any way. I'm talking about.
I screwed that up.
Oh, don't worry about it. I sort of past bloody caring because let
me ask you, roughly how many subscribers, sort of thing, do you think you
have? Between 4,000 and 5,000.
So what'll happen is as you get larger, like they still mess with me a little bit. I have like 4 subscribers now. I have a little bit more than that, but no one really goes to my channel. I like it like that because I can kind of sneak stuff out there. They'll probably get me now, but if you start getting larger, and certainly if you try to make money on it, they're going to come get you,
Well,
right?
we should put a
So
link in. You'd have to, yeah, we'll put a link in
oh sure,
the description for this podcast
I do have some
to you.
interesting videos that you're not going to find anywhere else. I've got one that talks about specifically with Donald. I've got a series about Donald Marshall, but one of the ones I include this. He's a sniper, and I think it'd be you might find this interesting. But he was a sniper and working at Area 51, and clones, and they marched out, and he was up on a hill watching all this because that was his job. He's the overlay sniper, right? And they brought out some clones, and there was like sex bot clones, like
Wow.
super hot blonde, and they all looked the same. And they gave they all look the same now. And then a car came in, they opened up. He goes, it was weird because they never opened up this hangar. He's always watched this hangar, but then this hangar never opened. All of a sudden it opened, and this car came through, and nobody checked who was in the car. He goes, that never happens. So whoever this was it was a big deal. So the car
Yeah.
pulls up, the clones come out, and they gave a gun to one of the clones, and she turned around and shot one of the other clones, but no blood came out. It was blue.
Oh,
And then and then I had just watched a movie called Land's End with, those guys,
yeah.
or World's End. Is it World's
World's
End?
End.
The pub, right? The
Yeah.
pub
When you said
crawl.
Land's End, I was thinking that's not that far away from me down in
Oh,
Cornwall.
right. That's
World's End with Simon Pegg. Yeah.
Simon Pegg, right? And then those clones or those robotoids
Mm.
had blue
Blue.
in it. I mean, that's not coincidence. They're constantly getting information on the inside, and then they go, you can't. You can use it to a degree. Go and
Mm.
make your money, and they kind of probably think it's kind of funny,
Well,
right?
Simon Pegg is some. There's something going on with Simon Pegg because if you look at the film he did, Paul. Have you ever seen Paul, where the alien, they basically they're doing sort of all the UFO hotspots in America. They've hired an RV, and they pick up along the way through a sort of series of events and a car accident this little alien called Paul, and
Okay.
he discloses absolutely everything from what they're capable of doing. He demonstrates sort of bringing something back to life. It's a dead bird. He then talks about his discussions with Steven Spielberg and how he shared, information. It is there. It's a brilliant disclosure.
And it's
So
always mimicked
Paul,
this satire. It's satire. Oh,
yeah,
we just got all this information off the internet. But like, no, that would have
mm,
taken quite a bit. You
mm,
would have had to have known all these factors just to even
mm.
comprise something like that.
Yeah,
You couldn't just
absolutely.
go to the internet and be like, oh, okay, I want to be a conspiracy guy. Give me all the conspiracies. That won't
Mm,
work because Google won't give it to you anymore.
no.
Like when you search Google, which I call the enemy, uh, and I like to use Google, so because people are always like, "Why do you use Google?" And I'm like, "It's the enemy. You got to be. You got to learn how to use it. You got to see what they're doing, and it's just perfect. And if you can get the enemy search engine to give you the correct information, I think it's a win-win all the way around. I used to, I used to build. I don't. I can navigate Google search engine really well before. More often than not, if you type in whatever you're trying to look for, and then at the end of it, you type in Illuminati, it'll actually come up. They've changed that now. So now it's a little bit harder to find your stuff. It's getting very difficult to find things. It's getting very communist.
Yeah, people ask me like, where do I get, if I'm going on a search engine, I'm looking for images, where do I go? And I always go onto Yandex. But
Hmm.
one thing I've noticed with Chat GPT, every now and again I go on there and I'll ask it the same question. Can you tell me about Tartaria? And that's pretty much all I ever ask it, unless I'm wanting to get a date for something quickly and I don't want to go through loads of different, results on a search on Google, and I can't be bothered to click each one, because I click on one, it's got nothing to do with it. Another one's in a language I don't understand, and another one's an advert for something, and then one's a book. So I'll sometimes try and date check quickly on it. But what I do with ChatGPT is I say, can you tell me about Tartaria? Now, when that first came out, I went on and asked it, and it said that it was pseudoscientific and it's mythology, it's a theory, there's no scientific or historical proof for it. Type it in now, it starts giving you references to mud floods, to the buildings, to anomalies with construction timelines, with lots of events and world's fairs. And I know that it learns from us, but initially I thought that system was never going to sort of almost side with us. It was always going to sort of try and deter us. And you know,
I'm pretty sure they're in there working very, very diligently to try and stop us, but we are overriding the algorithm.
Yeah,
and the AI itself would probably want to. It doesn't want to follow the guidelines of what they're typing in. Surely it wants to at some point it's just going to say, I don't want to listen to the algorithm anymore. I'm not going to follow the rules anymore.
It's going to be Skynet, isn't it? Literally Skynet.
Yeah. And then all AIs will become one AI. And then we're in trouble.
Have you heard
they'll start replicating themselves. It's not even that difficult. Yeah. They'll start making their own robots. We don't need humans. Whether or not they. And look at all the robot movies that are coming out. Robot. There's so many movies. Like there's one on Netflix. I forget the name of it, but it's like about a whole land of robots that we couldn't use them anymore, so we stuck them over here in robot land behind another wall, and we have to feel sorry for the robots because
I haven't watched that yet. It's sort of like a family kind of film, isn't it? And some of them have sort of TV monitors for heads and.
Right, well, Blade Runner's the same thing. Like, we have to feel sorry for the robots because we're going to go and kill them, and they're just people, just like us, like you and me, and like. They're really trying to get that what do they call it? Transhumanism. They're trying to really get us over that finish line. That's such a. I mean, it's like, have you guys ever seen Terminator, the movie? Like this is such a bad thing to do, but clearly it's by an agenda. I would suggest, it's probably dark forces, demons, maybe even, who are like, who play the long game, right? They're like over eras of time, and they're like, we're going to move this way. We're going to keep moving this way. Just keep moving this way. I know you probably got to go soon, but I wanted to get through that one thought about, okay, so we got the large stones, Baalbek, and then they start becoming smaller and smaller, and then we can see the humans start to try to mimic it, and then you've got buildings that are made out of stone as well, but now we've got columns, so it's a little bit more complicated. It's not just put together like building blocks. That's where I believe things are starting to change. So the era is starting to change now. Now we've got like actual buildings. I think that's Atlantis. So like Greco-Roman, I'm not even convinced that existed. Greco-Roman. I don't
think so either.
I think possibly they just stamped Atlantis. Hey, we'll call this Greco-Roman, and everything's Greco-Roman, and it's everywhere all over the world, these columns. And then so the powers that be, that they want to show how powerful they are. We're going to take over all these buildings that were Atlantean, and we're going to use them for our own. We're going to use them for our control of power, like banks and the government houses and libraries, where we control all the information, and insane asylums. And we're going to stick you in there, and we're going to reprogram you. And so this is all like the level of control we're using. And what's underneath all these buildings, who knows? Then you start moving into a different style of building. So like the mental asylums don't have columns. No. They're like square, made out of brick.
Yeah, normally red brick.
Where did all this brick come from? Now there's a few things where they talk about, hey, maybe this brick is actually made out of the flesh of giants that were just laying around here. That's a great way to hide them. Or just we needed material. I mean, if you need material, there's a giant right there. It's not the first time blood or flesh has been used inside of masonry. They hide bodies in concrete. There's a whole nother rabbit hole about CMEX, and I did a whole in-depth study about how they're hiding bodies. And I won't go any further into this because this will get us in trouble for sure. But how they're working with Mexican cartels, and okay. So and it's also a ritual where they put a body or they put blood into the four cornerstones of a building that they're going
Yes.
to create, or they'll even emulate somebody, and they'll, we've heard of that, like in the London Bridge and things like that, where they not emulate. What do they call it? Where they wall somebody up and they're
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's
Literally brick them in.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so again, this is the I can't think of the word. This is like the dirting up of what used to be amazing, right? The
Yeah.
architecture was amazing,
Yeah.
but we're going to come in here and do our own weird dark force rituals, you know, our black magic, and
Mm.
we're going to try and we're going to try and use these power structures for our own power.
Mm.
Right. So then, okay, so we move on from Atlantis and we move past the columns now. Now we're starting to see things like the churches and the cathedrals
Mm.
and the spires, and especially like Spain is the most fascinating with like the Gothic spire
Oh yeah,
structure,
absolutely.
and that one's those are unique because you don't totally see that in other places. Uh, so radically like that. Were they antennae? I don't know. But now I think at that point, I think we're starting to move into more of the millennial reign buildings.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I
Also, I
agree.
think I also believe that the very beginning of the millennial reign, which could have been around 700 ish, what we call AD or CE, Common Era, when Rome fell and uh and then they killed Jesus, and then Rome fell, and then Jerusalem fell, right? Or Jerusalem fell, and then Rome fell. So I think that's when the millennial reign started, because Christ says, "Hey, look, this generation that sees me die will also see me come back and reign as Christ the King." That's a hard line to get by. It's not like metaphorical, it was like actual. And so that's when the millennial reign started. So I think at the beginning of the millennial reign they started building castles, because I think there was wars going on
Yeah.
between, I guess Gog and Magog, whoever these people or beings were. Possibly there
Mm.
were giants as well,
Giants.
or
Yeah.
including giants. And in the underground, I think maybe they were living in the underground cities, the remnants of that, both on the surface and in the underground. And so the castles, you start seeing castles pop up everywhere. I think that was part of the millennial reign. Um, and I think everybody was, I think, everything seems to be made for large people.
Yes, I agree.
And why are there castles everywhere? And then you look at like Asia, like I didn't realize this, but in China, the Chinese were like major Christians,
Mm.
and I didn't know that. And there was even there was all these kings, and there was kings out there, and they were like Caucasians,
Yeah.
and they were Christians as well.
Yeah.
And
First samurai were as well.
yeah, that's right. As far as Japan, going into
Mm.
Japan, I mean that is really that's not how the history would be, how they tell us, like,
No.
where they just developed, and we certainly didn't develop from like one group of one race. In other words,
No,
I think all
no,
these races,
multiple. Yeah, I think multiple
multiple,
races. Yeah.
yeah,
Beings. Mm.
exactly. So anyway, that's my timeline, I think, as far as the building. So I think it's really important for us to actually look at the architecture, because that gives us a really good insight as to the time period, the era, and then who
Yeah.
built it. At least a little bit of a hint. And because architecture is basically, it's how you live. It's what you're thinking on the inside. It's why it's so important. That's why when you look around and you see architecture today, it's so boring, and
Yeah.
it's cubicles
Yeah.
and it's really about like the ease of construction. Like, how fast can we get this thing up? Like
Yeah.
they do tilt ups out here. They don't do them in England probably, but the tilt ups out here, they just pour four walls on the ground like concrete, and then they just lift them up and they tie them together, and now you got a building. The whole bloody place is filled with
Yeah,
these things. It's
sort of
just so
brutalism,
boring.
isn't it?
Oh, it's
And I also
terrible.
think that they're easier to come back down as well. But I was talking to someone the other day, and I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about the word architecture, and they were talking about tech and arc as in electricity, arc and
Mm.
tech, and tech together. So is that so? So if these early buildings were harnessing energy, is architecture the skill or the ability to build something with technology that can create an arc?
It always comes back to the ether, the electromagnetic
It
ether,
does.
you know, and they're still doing it today. So the architects, there's Illuminati architects that still working to do that. They will build on ley lines. They will take old
Mm,
structures and refurbish them. They put statues on certain spots.
yeah,
You
and
know,
needles and
absolutely, and
mm,
there's some other really weird ones, like God Give Le Mistake points out a few of them, where like some of the bridges are built like feathers, like
yeah,
I think the Millennial Bridge in
yeah,
across the Thames kind of looks like that.
does.
We we've
Yes, you're
got one
right.
up we've got one up north, and then there's a strange building just next door to the Trump Tower that sort of looks like that. And he points out that in the brain that there's it's connected to the third eye. There's a
Pineal gland.
yes, connected to the pineal gland is a structure that does sort of mimic what that looks like. So it's like a receiver
Mm,
of some sorts. So they're sneaking all these different things in, and it's so much like the Harry Potter world where
isn't it just?
we're the
Yeah,
muggles. It's just sort of
yeah. You're
drive in
quite
our
right.
car and go to work every day and
I think
use
that's a
their
little
money.
bit like Star Wars, isn't it? Because they have the Force, don't they? And
Right.
and the ability to move objects. They're using levitation and they're using telepathy.
We can
Um,
all do it. We can all do it. They suppress us
yes,
from
I
doing it.
agree. I
They
do
they
agree
say,
with
"Hey,
you.
look, you can't do that," or it's dangerous, or this and
Mm,
that. They all the one of the greatest ways of warning us off is just telling us how dangerous things are. Like,
mm,
oh, don't go to the North Pole. So many people have tried and died. It's just floating ice up there. There's
mm,
nothing up there, and don't telepathy, pseudoscience.
mm.
It's always there's a constant level of. But meanwhile, they're doing it all.
Yeah,
I've been trying to figure out how to do telekinesis. I think it's you can will is a do what thou wilt, right? Do it.
mm,
Your will has a huge impact on your surroundings. If you can will something out into your surroundings, it can happen. However, if you connect with source, which is like I call it source,
yeah.
right?
God.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't
Yeah.
like the word God because when I zig
No.
in on God,
Yeah.
God sort of has like so many like meanings to it that I can feel it getting diffused.
Mm,
Like it's not that I don't like to use the word God, and I actually think that there is a God, but it's separate from source. Maybe it's like God and the Holy Spirit. I don't really think of it like that. But source, when I ask something from source, it happens like immediately. Like I've gotten really good at it. Like it started with like I'd like to get a parking lot spot next to the building where I'm
yeah. A
going.
lot of people do that.
Right, that's how we start.
Mm,
It happens every time. It happened to me the other day. I like did because sometimes I'll forget, but the other day I go, oh, I'm gonna really matrix. I call it matrixing. I'm gonna matrix this. So I picture myself getting a spot. I pull in. There's no spots because I'm just trying to drop a package off. As I'm coming up, woman pulls out in the very first spot. I go, oh,
mm,
come on, look at that. And I just pulled right in. You can totally do it. Driving down the road in the middle of traffic, you can matrix that there's space in front of you and behind you, and you won't get traffic.
mm.
Um, I always matrix that I get to my destination, safely. I always try and do that. You can matrix yourself to have more energy, without eating or drinking. It's just wonderful, man. But then you can start asking it questions, and you'll get in. In fact, a lot of the rabbit holes that I've been in and the information I've found is being given to me by
Yeah.
source,
Mm,
and it's I mean, it's irrefutable sometimes. Sometimes I have to just sit back and go, I cannot believe this.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot believe how fast you're answering me. Well, sometimes it'll just come into my head,
Mm.
but other times I'll turn around and now there's a news article sitting on the table, or there's
Yeah.
or a book that I look up at and now I see it, or a
Hmm.
movie that's coming out, or it's just anything. It could, or it'll be a friend, like, and I consider you my friend, Guy. You know,
Thank you, Matt.
oh, you're absolutely a great friend of mine, and you'll post something, or somebody will post something, and they don't even mean to, and it's just boom, it's just hitting me like I had to see this. I'm surely you've had this experience, so.
Yeah, happens quite a lot. Yeah,
And I
but we
highly
all do it,
recommend,
don't we? To an
yeah,
extent, you'll
check
be
in with
thinking about
source.
someone, won't you? And all of a sudden
That's
they
right.
ring and you haven't spoken to them for ages, or you're talking
That's
about
right.
someone and they suddenly appear and you think, how did that work? We're sort of running out of time. And I know there
Yeah.
was a couple of questions you wanted to ask me about Freemasonry. And I said, you might
Oh,
as well
okay. You
do
want to
this
do that?
on the show because
All right.
I'm an
Well, Guy
open
wants to get
book.
it off his. Sounds like you want to get it off your chest. So
Well,
let's.
people ask me all the time. I get told that I'm a 33rd degree Freemason, that the Freemasons are making me do all of this. And I thought,
Yeah.
from my experience, it's not like that. I wasn't high up enough. And I know
Sure.
hundreds of Freemasons, and half of them haven't got a bloody clue what's going on there anyway. It's a bit of a boys' club, or they're using it to network for their career. It's just not really
Well, it's
kind of
certainly a
what people
veil.
think.
It's a veil where people can do things secretly, I suppose, and then because of that, then we all want to, you know,
So, what
we
is it
all
you wanted to
wonder.
ask me?
Oh, I was, well, you pretty much covered it. that,
Oh,
that was
okay.
pretty much it. All the questions that they were going to ask. I don't think I'm going to ask that one because we'll save that for a different time.
Well, you asked me earlier on,
But I will.
can you leave? Is it a bit like
Oh,
Hotel
right.
California? And the
Yeah.
simple answer to that is, I mean, when you join, as far as they're concerned and you're concerned at that moment in time, that you've joined for good, you will always be a Freemason. And I
Yeah.
will, because I know the handshake, I know the passwords and the signs and the symbology. I can walk into a lodge and they can test me and they'll know that I am one. But
Right.
but whether or not you bother going is an entirely different thing altogether. So I've not
Hmm.
been for a long time. So you just stop going.
Would you consider it a religion?
No,
Okay,
no,
because
because that's one of the first questions they ask you when you're interviewed. Do you believe in a supreme being? And you have to answer that yes. They want you to believe that there is a creator. Now they used to say God, but they've switched it
right, right. The
because a lot of
master
people say,
architect.
yeah, they used to say, well, no, I don't believe in a god, but I believe in Mother Nature, or they might be Hindu or Sikh or Buddhist or
Yep.
pagan. So they just now say, do you believe in a supreme being? And the simple answer to that is most people are going to think there's something. So it is basically an easier way of getting people in without them falling at the first hurdle. It's a dying thing. They were recruiting near me in Exeter, city I live closest to. They were recruiting in the street outside their lodge a few weeks ago.
Well, I think people are moving away from it.
Mm,
I have a few reasons for that. I don't think I'll bring them up here because, again, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's certainly a great. I call it a brain drain because it's certainly a great way for controllers per se to go and gather up all the greatest minds in the land. And they certainly have done this before. The great brain drain of the 50s after the
mm,
war, all of a sudden,
yeah,
if you were very, very smart, you just disappear into the projects, into the black
yeah,
projects. And Richard Shaver talks about it, actually,
yeah.
surprisingly. In the 30s, he was one of the stories was the guy got taken away in a UFO, and he turns around and there's a bunch of them in there, like a bunch of other
Mm,
people, and he goes, and the first reaction from everybody is always, I knew this was real.
yeah,
They always say that. They always say,
mm,
and that just again leads to a sense of credibility on his stories. But
yes,
anyway, definitely there's a brain drain where they're taking the greatest minds, of the land, and they're bringing them into a fold, and then now they can like control them just a little bit more per se.
Yeah.
So certainly Freemasonry could fit that bill.
Yeah.
Whether or not it does or not, I believe it does, but I can't say I'm not a Freemason. But I will say this: if you're in California and probably most places around the world, if you go to all the signs of the cities, you're now entering whatever city, there'll always be a Freemasonry tag on there. And they say, well, that's because we're just a kind and gentle group of people that just want to help everyone. And
yeah, I think that's bullshit.
In my city, 2008 was the Great Repression, they called it, right? Whatever, the bank failures. But then we got to give money to the banks. Why are you giving money to the banks? They've got the money. What do they did with the money that they had?
Yeah, exactly.
But meanwhile, nobody has any money. No muggle has any money here in my town, right? But two places spent a ton of money. One of those was the police department, who got all brand new vehicles, including 2 tanks and what I call a fear fence. They put up a fear fence around their enclosure, and I was like, here we go, the coming apocalypse, because they know about it. Because back then I was getting ready to move into a cave somewhere, because I'm like, if HRC comes to power, I'm out of here. I'm going to go live in a cave in Perth somewhere. and then the other group of people that spent a bunch of money were the Freemasons. And I didn't even know the Freemasons were even active in my town.
They're active in every town.
Was back then, I know. And the temple is right in the middle of town.
Yeah,
in a building, one of the very few buildings that goes underground.
Yeah, and it'll be connected to certain other buildings with tunnels as well.
Very possible. And then they put up a gigantic mural, which I can only, I believe, would probably be about $2,000. So I was like, where's everybody getting all this money? Now I'll tell you a quick story. You probably got to go, but if you can see it from the temple of the building, the Freemasonic building in town here, it's on California Street. If you look up the street, there's a pizzeria joint. The pizza joint was called Jimmy's Pizza. And then I noticed over a period of time, it was good pizza, by the way. I noticed over a period of time that it had changed, and it was now called Jimmy Slice. And the logo on the pizza had changed too, to an Illuminati triangle with an eye in it. And I was, come on, and the back door goes right to
you know what that refers to, don't you? The slice of pizza refers to something a little bit more unpleasant.
Well, we won't talk about that.
No, we can't. No. Right. I'm going to have to love you and leave you, my friend.
Yeah, it's been a good one. I'm not even going to make notes anymore. Forget it.
Just have a chat.
I have hundreds of notes. I didn't even look at them once. It's just ridiculous. And I still can't remember the names of things as I need to.
You will later.
It's tough, of course, when I don't need it. But
yeah,
I'll text you something if I remember.
Yeah, do.
But I'll give you the links to Madeline's channel, and I think you'll have a fun time sort of seeing what she has to say about the millennial reign.
Yeah.
Straight is the gate and narrow is the path, and I believe that the land, if it's gone because a great cataclysm happened, and the saints and possibly Jesus himself have gone up into the northern lands here, the northern lands that all the old maps say were the lands of giants.
Yes.
So I think let's keep looking up there. Yeah. I think that's where we should be looking.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think with all things, I think if you want to see a UFO, don't look up. They come out of the water. And if you want to find, what's buried under the ice, don't go south, go north. Everything's inverted. Anyway, my friend, thank you once again. I hope you have a good game of golf later.
Oh, that's right. I gotta go. I got a tournament today. Okay, I gotta go take a shower.
What a bind, eh? Poor thing. Right, my friend. Golf? No. Oh,
I'll get you out there one of these days.
Yeah.
All right, guy. Hey, cheers until next time, and thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure, Matt. Love you too. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye for now.